Are we on?
We've had a false start because there was no countdown. But either way, is that
Wow.
what we are? Is that what's going to happen this weekend? A false start at the Singapore Grand Prix, ladies and gentlemen. We normally have a 5-second countdown before we say you're live. And Soumya and I are both wondering, did we miss the countdown? But clearly we both didn't, and we're live.
And we are live. Wow. Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Inside Line F1 podcast. This is the Singapore GP preview episode that you are listening to. And there are a lot of talking points. I will come to a lot of streaks ending or breaking in a second. But first, we need to tell you who we are. Let's just get all the introductions, housekeeping duties away. Because when we get into the racing, I know for a fact we are not going to be stopping when it comes to all the discussions. So then, we're missing F1 Stats Guru for this particular episode, but he will be back for the review. Kunal Shah is here along with me, former marketing head of Force India, and also a TV expert on screen nowadays as well for the Viaplay network in Norway, alongside his duties as working as a TV producer there. And of course, my name is Soumya Arora. I'm the voice of the MotoGP Indian Grand Prix, the Indian Racing League, Indian Supercross Racing League, you name it, and everything Indian motorsport. Touchwood, I've had the opportunity to talk about this. But now I get to talk about 2 night races in a row because I was in Chennai a few weeks ago for India's first ever night street race. And then we come to Singapore. But the narrative here is a bit different. And this is the one moment I've been waiting for the last hour and a half. Because, Kunal, let me ask you a couple of questions. And this is where I want your reaction on this. You know that Verstappen has never won a race here, right? Clearly.
That is correct.
And you know that Leclerc has never converted his pole here to a win.
That is also correct.
And Mercedes haven't won here since COVID.
Yes, that is correct.
But, and McLaren haven't won here forever, basically. That is also
years.
15 years. That's the number. But while these are the top 4, we're counting out a really big team who have some sort of numerological and I wouldn't say spiritual connection, but yeah, there's some sort of circle coming to life here. Do you remember the last time the Renault Formula One team won a street race? Do you remember?
Has to be Fernando Alonso, Flavio Briatore, Nelson Piquet Jr.
Singapore?
That trio? Singapore, 2008.
Guess who's back?
Naomi Campbell is back.
The first Singapore Grand Prix with Flavio Briatore since 2008. I think the band is coming together. Let's not count Alpine out for the win this time. Seriously. That's the one street that we need to focus on.
And in this case, of course, guys, we're joking. This is all sarcasm before you all think that we're cooking up some match-fixing, race-fixing story. The truth is, Esteban Ocon is on his way out, as we know. So it's not that there's a driver waiting for a contract. And we know the Alpine, driver situation for next year as well. There's Gasly and Jack Doohan. But yes, the band is coming together.
You mean favors can be done?
I hope not. I really hope not. I mean, I really wish Flavio was banned from the Singapore paddock, much like I wish he was banned from all the paddocks in the world, even if he's a genius in Formula One, because of the way he's tainted the sport for life. But anyway, this is not about Flavio. This is about the greatness, the original night race. That's the one word we are going to keep. That's the one term we are going to keep being told on the broadcast every single day of the broadcast this weekend, because we've got night races. The last night race was in Jeddah. Of course, so that's been a long time. Yeah. But we've also had lots of street races, like Formula One is now said, Charles Leclerc is the king of the streets with 100 points scored on street races.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so Singapore, greatest spectacle of motorsport. Absolutely, I believe that. I've been to so many of them earlier on that I'm like, wow, if there's one race I really want to attend, it's Singapore.
How come? Because we've got Las Vegas now, which is the greatest, grandest spectacle, not just in Formula One, but if you were to believe F1, anywhere in the world, greatest spectacle of entertainment. And then there's Jeddah as well, which has done an incredible job with the circuit. But even though, I've spoken to so many Formula One fans who travel the globe and have the privilege of doing so, they still love Singapore, even though there are other flashier, brighter, more spectacular races around. Why is that the case? Like, what's up with this place?
That's a great question. I think just because they were the original ones to actually start treating a race weekend as a weekend of celebration, a weekend of entertainment. They started to have headline acts pretty much every day of the race weekend. So that was a part of the race ticket itself. Also, I love these street races where you don't have to bother about parking. You take a metro and you walk
Yeah.
a couple of stations and you're up there. And in general, Singaporeans, very friendly people, great city, lots of heat, humidity, and so on. And I still feel it's definitely one of the hallmark races over the years. And there's a physical challenge, there's a mental challenge for the drivers, and there's also a mechanical challenge because even though Baku was a street race where we come from, Baku was low medium downforce. Singapore street race, 90-degree corners, low to medium speed, pretty much all of them, except for the last two turns, which is
Yeah.
high speed. But Singapore has a lot of high downforce as well. So different things that Singapore throws up. So I would definitely say anyone considering Singapore, that's that one race to attend.
And it's weird, right? Because the moment you say high downforce, you think, oh, Red Bull's going to be back in contention. This has been Max Verstappen's bogey track. He's never won here. In fact, he was knocked out of Q2 this time last year, and Liam Lawson went through in Q3. That's how bad of a circuit it's been for him overall. And then consider the fact that Sergio Perez has won a race here in 2022 and Max Verstappen hasn't won a race here at all. And Perez comes in being the closest Red Bull driver to a win in the last race. I don't know how this is panning out. I mean, that's Red Bull and their conundrums. And that's only one part of four different teams who could win it. And Max realistically has what? One hand on the championship. But as we were discussing before the episode went live, that hand could be slipping away here.
Yes, in fact, Somil and I absolutely believe, guys and girls, that the Singapore Grand Prix weekend is that one critical weekend for Lando Norris and his championship hopes. Okay, and why don't we just break it down mathematically? The gap between the two drivers, Lando Norris P2, Max Verstappen P1, is 59 points, as we know. There are 7 races remaining, out of which 4 are Grand Prix, which means 26 possible points, which means 26 into 4 is 104 points. And there are 3 races remaining, which is a sprint and the Grand Prix format, which means 3 times the sprint and Grand Prix score, which is 26 points in the Grand Prix win with the fastest lap, and 8 points for the sprint win is 34 points that one could score,
Yeah.
which means there are 206 points available. And the gap is 59 points. Okay. If we were to try and understand what Somil has just said about this being a Max Verstappen bogey track, a Red Bull bogey track. Last year, this was the only race they didn't win. Carlos Sainz won.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is the track is extremely bumpy. And the minute Red Bull has to lower their car, they struggle even more so. And they've been struggling the last 7-8 races as well. I mean, Max hasn't had a win for 7 races, which is for the first time in 2020. And he's also not had a podium for a long since then, which is for the first. I remember writing the stat just a second. So Max it's his worst no podium streak since like 2019 or something. Okay. So what happens? Imagine if Lando Norris wins and takes the fastest lap. Okay. We had a McLaren winning in Baku and we had a McLaren taking the fastest lap. Piastri won, Norris took the fastest lap. Now imagine Lando winning this weekend, taking those 26 points. And Max, I'm not saying there'll be a DNF. I'm not hoping or wishing for these kind of battles to be settled by a DNF. But if Red Bull is down to being the 4th fastest and Max is, say, 7th or 8th, could there be a near 20-point swing in the Drivers' Championship, Somil? And if that were to happen, it could well be 39 points as a gap with 6 races to go.
That's doable.
Yeah, that's doable. And imagine if that was to happen, 39 points gap with 6 races. But how many points would then be available? If we were to extrapolate that, it'll be 180 points available after the Singapore Grand Prix. So for Lando Norris's title hopes, the Singapore Grand Prix is the most critical race of the season. His execution, his luck, McLaren's execution, strategy, pit stops, luck, pace, everything has to be spot on.
An interesting point on that as well. This is last. This is actually one of the last of the irregular circuits, if I may put it that way. After that, we go to traditional racing circuits, some of which suit Red Bull more than anything else. We're going to Mexico City, we're going to Brazil, we're going to Qatar, we're going to Abu Dhabi. Circuits where they've been good. We also go to Austin, which is a normal racing circuit, but Red Bull are also getting new upgrades, which should help them out. I think everyone will be getting new upgrades there because it's a month after Silverstone, so Singapore. So everyone has a good amount of time to manufacture the components, ship it out, and everything. But in the middle is also Las Vegas. So I think Singapore, Las Vegas, two of the only irregular circuits where McLaren generally have outperformed Red Bull this year at these sort of places. And Ferrari have been the best of all of them. Don't know if they will be again this weekend. But to loop it back down to Lando Norris, I want to bring it to McLaren and the way they behave now as constructors leaders, if that's the right thing. First time since 2014 that they're leading the Constructors' World Championship. It's a humongous achievement considering how they were down in the doldrums a few years ago and none of us gave them any hope whatsoever. But again, the point remains, Kunal, they're a young team. They've not been in this situation before. A lot of the people that are part of this team now, should they change the way they approach the championship now that they've, in a way, secured the constructors' lead to now favor Lando because that's the one possible? Or should they just carry on with papaya rules? Whoever gets the lead into turn one is the one who controls it. I'm conflicted in this whole scenario here.
What are you conflicted about? Let's break that down.
My conflict is, now that you're a Constructors' Championship leader, now that you've got that secured, and it looks like your car's consistently outperforming Red Bull everywhere, and there is a theoretical chance of Lando winning the championship, do you carry on with your moral, ethical way of doing business, which is whichever driver has the advantage heading into turn one, we give them the lead and give them priority and make sure that they keep the position? Or do you actively nudge this battle towards Lando because there is a chance he could win the double? Where do you stand on this?
Well, the way I see it is they haven't won the the Constructors' Championship.
True.
Yes, they're in the lead. It's a 20-point lead. It's a massive lead, I would say. But it could all be wiped out. I mean, we saw that, one Ferrari and one Red Bull got taken out just in Baku, right? So as these races come at us fast and hard, I think McLaren will not really need to change their approach. They will prioritize scoring with both cars the maximum they can. That'll be point number one.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, if there is scope to help Lando Norris score more against Max Verstappen, then they will pursue that. That's very, very clear. They will want to win the constructors. They are already in the lead. They need to literally change nothing. And even when it comes to giving Lando Norris priority, it could be that Piastri gives up a second spot for Lando to finish second and then settle himself for third. But it doesn't seem like Piastri is going to have to end up giving up the race win for Lando Norris. So lots of ifs and buts play out here.
My point exactly. Where does the if line end? Does it end on the race win? Does it end on second place? Because this is the confusing part. If Oscar legitimately gets P1, and we're in a Hungary-like scenario again, where the team have put out, hypothetically, but something along those lines could happen, where Oscar finds himself in P2, got the race lead on his own, but then Lando cycled out ahead. Will McLaren still do what they did in Hungary, which is let Lando go, which is let Lando get behind Oscar and give him the race win? I'm really conflicted here because according to their ethical way of doing things, Oscar should get the win, but there's the temptation of a double.
That's $1 million question. And I think this is where it's all going to start getting messy because McLaren will want to play fair and they will want to play fair with both their drivers. And I have great respect for the 1997 Jacques Villeneuve world champion. But he said, Oscar wasn't quick in the first part of the season, so he should give up points in the second part of the season. To me, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, if anything, the trajectory that Oscar Piastri has shown in the last 7 races, mind you, he has been the only driver to lead the last 7 races. Okay, he scored multiple wins and he scored the maximum number of points compared to Norris, Hamilton, and even Max Verstappen. And in fact, if you were to compare him to Max Verstappen, okay, Max, he scored 41 points more than Max Verstappen. Okay, so Piastri's got 135 points. Norris has 104.
Wow.
Okay. So my point is it is at some point going to get messy, but I think Singapore is where that if factor comes in even hard. If Max is running seventh, eighth, or whatever, and there is that scope to give more points to Lando, maybe McLaren will try and do that this weekend to Oscar. It just goes to show, will they actually push Oscar to giving up a race win or not?
And will they be in contention for a race win or not? Is going to be an interesting talking point, because street circuits are normally where Ferrari have been the best. And they have won Monaco, they almost won Baku. They've been good at these sort of places. And Singapore, lots of. And this is something interesting. There's a very fun piece of insight that Carlos Sainz gave after qualifying in Baku. He said Leclerc is the best at maximizing the way a car turns from a straight line to a 90-degree corner. Because according to him, and I'm very amazed to know this because I haven't heard this from any other racing driver, there's a certain skill in making sure that your car, I hope I'm articulating this correctly, is able to brake as much as possible, as hard as possible, and then turning it as sharply as possible, which is what 90-degree corners need you to do. It's like flat straight and then flat left or flat right. And that turnaround time between doing so, letting off the brake and turning in the car, that micro detail is where Charles Leclerc is the best. And that allows, it's something that the Ferraris also allowed him to be the best at, which is why he's got pole for so many years in Baku. And these are similar types of corners in a way that you see in Singapore and a lot of places. So there's another little variable to add in here. And Carlos simply said that whole subsector of driving, Leclerc is the best at. We just can't compete. And Singapore has a lot of that now.
Singapore has a lot of that. Lots of low speed corners, 90 degrees. They've removed 490-degree corners last year,
Yes.
if you remember. They modified that, but it's still lots of emphasis on traction, getting up and close to the wall. And, lots of drivers I've spoken to over the years have always said it's not about how quick you go at a street circuit. It's about how much time you leave on the table. Okay,
Yeah.
so every time you're ramping up and carrying momentum through Q1, Q2, Q3, it's more about being able to go closer to the walls to extract more lap time. You already know you can do that. It's about, are you able to do that when it matters the most?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we had a very close qualifying session last year. I remember there was Sainz, Russell, and Leclerc less than a tenth between all three of them, which I think is, an indicator of the fact that it's going to be very close this weekend. In fact, will it be 3 teams in the mix or will it be 4 teams? Because I think McLaren and Ferrari will definitely be in the mix. When it comes to Mercedes, it's all about whether they're able to nail their setup and get their car in the window. And, getting that car in the window is so critical that everyone, when it's not there, just talks that we are actually quick. We just couldn't get the window and hence we were out of balance. George Russell on the hard compound in Baku suddenly came alive.
Yeah.
On the medium, he was nowhere. So it is the same tire compounds this weekend as well, much as it was in Monza and in Baku. So you can't really rule them out either.
And on those one lap qualifying pace moments, they were phenomenal, which is another interesting point. They got P3 in Monza in qualifying with George, even though they had a compromised practice. They were good in qualifying there as well, and Russell was able to extract a lot. And then we come to Singapore, but track position is so crucial. You just can't count them out. Maybe not for the battle for the win, but somewhere around there, they could also influence things so much. And then there's Lewis, who in my opinion has the greatest Singapore GP qualifying lap ever, 2018. So
yeah,
there's that as well.
That he was in his best meditative Sir Lewis Hamilton status. So if you ask me, I think some of those laps, when you see them, you just identify saying, my goodness, you're so much in the zone, so much being one with the car and the driver. So lots of ifs and buts that could happen. But Singapore in itself, Samuel, we should probably talk of what makes this circuit so special. So one of the first things is these races run over 1 hour 45 minutes in itself. So these are
Yeah.
long races. Okay, even though corners are now down from 23 to 19 and a lap is extra, the average cornering speeds are probably the slowest of the season. Lots of bumps. And the slow speed is where the
Yeah.
challenge comes when it comes to traction, managing your tires, and in fact, even brake cooling and wear and tear and so on. And that's why I said,
Agreed. Yeah.
it's also a mechanical challenge for the teams as it is a physical and mental challenge for the drivers, because you go up to 60 degrees centigrade in the cockpit, 70-80% humidity. In fact, Friday and Saturday this weekend is expected to be a rained out weekend.
Wow.
Okay, lots of thunderstorms expected, and the humidity in general in Singapore is so high, and I've experienced this firsthand, is that for hours after the rain has actually stopped, everything can still be wet because, hey, guess what? It's not dry. It's not dry and hot. It's hot and humid. So different geographical, different climatic conditions that throw up as a challenge as well. And I think the one streak that could be broken is, I think we've gone 8 races without a safety car,
Yeah.
but Singapore has always had a safety car in every single race. And in fact, in the last 6 races, there have been 11 instances of the safety car. So lots of start and stop, lots of race interruptions from a strategy, from a driver point of view as well, that we have to factor in when it comes to the single race this weekend.
Exactly. So much switching around could happen here. This is where the team that's also the best tactically in terms of their strategy is going to have a really good time, which is where Red Bull generally have been very good. McLaren have gotten better recently. I love that there are so many elements that we now have to talk about in considering who's going to win a race, because it's no longer, hey, they're the fastest car, they're going to win anyway. It's so many micro elements that are coming together. And then we're also not touching up upon Sergio Perez enough, because he's been incredible around here. Weirdly, the confidence seems to be back after just one race. He's now the leading driver in terms of momentum in the Red Bull racing camp, and Red Bull could be decent around here. So we don't even know how that's going to play out. 8 drivers. For the first time, Verstappen looks like the least likely of those 8. Weirdly. Or does
Yeah,
he? Or somewhere does he rank around P6 ahead of Russell and Hamilton for the win here?
I think now it all depends where Red Bull ranks in terms of the fastest constructor on Sunday. But I definitely get a feeling that they're running more experiments with Max, trying to get him more comfortable, and that's probably where they are. And like I said in the Baku review episode, that's also what Christian Horner hinted to at one point of time, saying we'll have to check what setups they ran and why Max was so much behind Checo Perez in itself. But the interesting point, Somil, is Red Bull was supposed to have a special livery this race weekend, which on performance grounds they have decided to not pursue. Can you imagine? No one could have scripted such a turnaround, a twist in the tail in the 2024 Formula One season. And the reason why I say twist in the tail is because Racing Bulls, which is definitely not as quick as Red Bull Racing, has already launched a new livery.
Yeah.
Mercedes has already launched a new livery commemorating their title sponsors' 50th year of celebrations. But Red Bull decided that even that tenth or whatever we can get, or 2/10 by not having a new livery, we will save that with weight saving coming from the change in paint.
It really is the end of an era now, isn't it? Like
I
Red Bull not doing special liveries.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And I said this in the Viaplay broadcast in Baku. It's not that the impact of Adrian Newey is being felt now. No, it's too
Yeah.
soon for any of that to happen. But how soon Red Bull gets out of this challenge or this engineering problem is going to be a factor of it's going to matter that they don't have Adrian Newey to go and ask and solve these problems with. And Manish Pandey, who's of course a dear friend, and the writer producer for Lucky, who was on our show a couple of years ago, he said something very interesting. He said, how much of the current car or this evolution of cars 18, 19, 20 have been Adrian Newey designs? We won't know. It's of course a team. It's no longer just one person designing the car. But is it that the chief architect of the car, the driver, the engineer who's given the most fundamental engineering for the car, has that engineer moved on, and the people who've not built the car trying to fix a car that is not theirs technically, or not theirs but their design or their engineering production?
Yeah.
Interesting to think of it that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like a painting, right? Or even a song that you're creating. Someone has an initial vision that they've put out. Now there's someone brought in to fix it, which is why it's. I mean, we can relate it to a car itself, right? A mechanic can fix the problem, but a mechanic cannot redesign the problem the way the engineer can. So, in a way, there are engineers working on the car, but it's not their engineering vision. It's a weird predicament that Red Bull finds itself in. And yeah, Singapore is going to answer so many questions with that regard. As we'll see in the midfield as well, there are questions hanging around Daniel Ricciardo's future. And I was legitimately shocked when he said this before the episode. Could they really let go of him now?
So Helmut Marko actually said this on Viaplay, and I know this because I coordinated that interview and I figured what we should ask him. He said that there is an announcement coming between Singapore and Austin. Okay, which pretty much means that it is a Liam Lawson announcement. I don't believe they're going to announce anything else. And one of the reasons why they're also doing that is because it's in Lawson's contract that he will race in one of the Red Bull cars in 2025, which is also why Sauber and Alpine and Williams being interested in Lawson, they didn't let go of him, they being Red Bull. Now the question is, could Singapore be Daniel Ricciardo's last race, or will this just be an announcement that Lawson will race from 2025? Which means, could the next 7 races be Daniel Ricciardo's last 7 races in Formula One? And if you were to ask me, and some outlets have also reported that Liam Lawson's contract also says that he will race a minimum of 5 races in 2024, which means, could we actually see a classic Red Bull driver swap where Ricciardo will be made test and reserve, and Liam Lawson gets that seat. And frankly, if Lawson's getting that seat in 2025 anyway, and that decision is made, why don't they just give him the seat now? Because Red Bull's contracts are different than contracts with other teams, where, for example, Ocon cannot be let go by Alpine just yet because the contract says he will race the season there. But with Red Bull, their contracts are different, which is why they are able to do these mid-season swaps. At least that's my understanding. Otherwise, how would they do these mid-season swaps in itself, right? So could it be Daniel Ricciardo's last race? I guess so. I'm not sure. It's been tough to actually pick someone between him and Tsunoda, but Tsunoda just, I think, early part of the season, just to remember what Jacques Villeneuve quoted, early part of the season, Tsunoda was the driver to watch for, and Daniel Ricciardo was just taking more time. So could he be, could Daniel just be another marketing asset for Red Bull Racing, which in itself is also, very worthy one to have in Formula One?
Exactly. Wow. That's one possibility. We know for sure this will be Kevin Magnussen's last Formula One race in Singapore. He is back racing for Haas, which means that Oliver Behrman steps out. But I'm bringing up Kevin and Behrman here because it reminds me of substitutes. And Franco Colapinto is one driver I really want to have my eye on. Because if I remember correctly, Williams wasn't it here? No, that was Hungary where they topped a free practice session. We should see how Williams are this weekend after that points finish in Baku, because there are people touting him for a seat in 25, particularly Sauber. But as virtual statsman Sean Kelly has very rightly pointed out on Twitter, X, that the same hype was created around Nick de Vries as well after his one-off performance in Monza 2022. I think we should wait. This race and the ones after that will really give us an answer, which is why the team principal of Sauber, Alessio Luni Bravi, has come out and said that we will make our decision in a few weeks. I think these few races are going to be very fun for the entire driver market.
Yes, I think so. That's a very good point. That the entire driver market will probably have a different outlook. You'll probably have those two seats announced as well. But it's great to exercise caution on Franco Colapinto and how well he's done, etc. If it was just Monza that he did well at, I would have probably been on the side where Sean Kelly is. But Baku's a different beast.
Yeah.
It's a circuit he's never driven on before, but he still managed to do extremely well. And what really impressed me, apart from him just out qualifying Albon, was that he ran the regular strategy in the top 10, the medium hard and not the reverse, and still scored points. So that's point number one. And on the F1 Nation podcast, the journalist from Argentina actually gave a very good example. He said, this is like in a video game. You go from easy, which was Monza, to medium, which is Baku, to Singapore, which is hard. And I think one of the things that will hit Colapinto the most in Singapore is just the heat and humidity and physical and mental fitness that he needs. Okay, so let's also be a little more, I would say, relaxed on him and a little more lenient with him on judging him. But I would still say that he's already shown what he's able to do in a Formula One car, which means if he gets a shot for next year, so be it. That's just how Formula One works. All you need is a foot in the door, and when you show that you are worthy to be in that room, and people also think as well, you probably are given one shot, and then you got to prove yourself again, I would say, which is what didn't happen in Nick de Vries's case. He did not end up proving himself again.
Yeah.
So Colapinto is definitely the driver to watch for, and something as simple as just him not getting eliminated in Q1 at a circuit like Singapore would be crucial, even if he's a little far off from Alexander Albon, for example.
That'll be such a big benchmark, yeah.
Yeah, so small wins, I would say they should go at. And you have to remember, I mean, for Formula 2 drivers, they don't really have that much jet lag management to do. Yes, Formula 2 races in Melbourne, which is what they did at the start of the year, etc. But primarily, Formula 2 races in Europe and the Middle East, where the time zone differences are not as much. So not only will Colapinto have to, get used to the heat and humidity in Singapore, but there's also jet lag management, right? And even though Singapore runs on European time, which means you will have breakfast in the afternoon and lunch dinner just past midnight, and that's why the race is a night race and so on. There is still jet lag involved. Because I think from Baku to Singapore is over 7,000 kilometers that they're going to travel and so on. So lots of interesting challenges for Colapinto to rise up to, I would say.
Singapore is the only one weekend where my parents would hate that I travel for Formula One, because that whole schedule at sleeping at 4 o'clock in the night and waking up at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that's going to be normal here for everyone. And it's weird. Didn't we have Steve Slater, the voice of Formula One in Asia, on our podcast? And I think we did. And he was telling us this whole story about how, was it you guys, Kunal, the Force India team that once got disrupted by some roadworks happening nearby, and then everyone had to go and quieten them down because, I mean, the rest of the world thought it was 11 o'clock in the morning. It's a good time to get roadworks done. But the McLaren engineers were just in the middle of their sleep. Or the Force India engineers, yeah.
That was actually my story, because we were there, and Andy Stevenson, who's a sporting director also at Aston Martin, hotels have maintenance work that's happening, etc. They started their maintenance work, what was their Singaporean morning time, but that was deep sleep time for everyone in Formula One. And I remember the ruckus it created after the first night itself, because you need to sleep, pretty much go to sleep at 4 o'clock, wake up at 12 o'clock. I remember breakfast times were set up differently at the hotel specifically for the Formula One teams, because, hey, who gets breakfast after 12 o'clock in the afternoon? Sometimes it's only as early as 10 that you need to finish breakfast in the morning. And so that's always the challenge. In fact, I remember Steve Slater having a brilliant answer as to what happens if what happens if the lights go out in Singapore in the night race, and what the organizers have done to help with that. And another interesting insight he gave is, after how the lights and the direction is set up in a way that in case a driver spins on track, they also know which way is the correct way to
Oh,
drive, and they're not
yes.
driving in the other direction. So I'm going to link to that episode in this description. It's a must here for all Formula One fans wanting to know how the Singapore Grand Prix came about, why the layout is the way it is, and why the initial layout was a little different, and why there are so many 90-degree corners and so on.
It's insane. But you've only got to be there working at one of these races to realize the uh, operational headaches that these people need to solve. And I just got a glimpse of that in Chennai a few weeks ago when we had India's first ever night street race. And that was at a Formula 4 level. But the political strings that you need to pull to make sure that you get the streets, the amount of labor you need to make sure that the track is made up in time, and then the right amount of and the right qualifications of engineers as well, who can make sure that the track is well secured in terms of all the safety needs. Like the catch fencing needs to be bolted in properly. Like the concrete barriers need to be stuck in properly in every single place. Curves need to be bolted down 100%. And then the homologation to come at such a last minute. And all these little things. And delivering food onto the circuit as well. Because we all are so concerned with getting the circuit made that we can sometimes forget basic things like washrooms, like food, like sanitation. And these things are all things where Singapore is a benchmark globally for any sort of street race. It just blows my mind about how good of an event this is, and how consistently we have it on, and how it always delivers. And another major thing that makes it so interesting to watch is variation during qualifying as well. Because last year, a perfect example of how street circuits evolve with track evolution and dust being cleared out and grip being laid down. Q1, best lap time, a 1 minute 32. By the time we got to Q3, the pole lap was a late 1 minute 30. That's roughly almost what? A second and a half, more than that, clawed down over qualifying. So these are things that will be very, very important, which means if you're the last driver on track in qualifying, there is a good chance you might just end up getting pole if you stitch it all together.
And from Friday to Sunday, which is Friday free practice to the Sunday race, there's almost a 3 to 4 second track evolution. And what that means is for teams and drivers to assess their evolution, pick up the extra grip, use it to their advantage, run the cars and their systems and sensors to also get used to the evolution that you nicely explained, Somal. But I know you are dying to get to the predictions part, because this is Carlos Sainz's only win last year.
Yes.
Right? A win on merit, a win that he engineered while sitting in that car. What's your prediction? Who is going to get pole this weekend?
Piastri. Oscar Piastri. Can't. I mean,
Okay.
I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. Okay, maybe I'm a fan now. Great. But Oscar Piastri it is.
I will pick Charles Leclerc for pole position this weekend. Okay, so who's going to win this weekend for you?
I mean, Leclerc doesn't have the best record in converting his pole positions at any other circuit. So, I mean, Singapore is also going to be a similar story in my eyes. Now, McLaren just seemed to be the whole package now. And you need. Singapore is a circuit where mental strength and nailing moments like the start are so, so important. And that's some place where I feel Oscar has the edge. So I'm going. I'm going
Wow,
McLaren.
so you
I'm going McLaren, and then I'm going Oscar rather than Leclerc over Oscar in this case.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm thinking. There are 4 DRS zones. There is always DRS trains in Singapore. Overtaking is very difficult. But one of the things that can happen is if you take the race lead, you're able to control the pace at the front and then pick it up based on when you need to pit and so on. I get a feeling Ferrari will actually convert that this weekend. They did that very well in Monaco. If at all they're running in the front 4, Ferrari and the McLaren drivers, and if Ferrari is leading at the front, they will be able to manage the race and use 2 cars against 2 cars, or 2 cars against 1 car, and pull off the win. So I'm going to go with a Leclerc pole, and maybe a Leclerc win in itself. And then he's going to get out of the car and say, oh my God, who would have thought I would win Monaco, Monza, and Singapore?
That'll be some achievement if he can get it done, though. That will be mind-blowing. But let's see.
Leclerc has had 4 consecutive podiums, which is his best has actually been 5 consecutive podiums, only 5, mind you, which was back in 2022. So it'll be interesting to see what Leclerc is able to do if Ferrari is in the right window this weekend in Singapore, because it will be cooler. This when you race at night, it is much cooler, the track conditions, as well, as opposed to racing in the afternoon as we've seen most of the other races. So that's going to be a factor that hopefully brings Mercedes closer in as well. Which, by the way, Mercedes to me with their new livery looks like the green Aston Martin.
They
So
do. It's weird how it's come about. It looks nice though.
yeah. And Hamilton's 350th win, while George Russell has won the head-to-head in qualifying this year. So that's going to be
350th?
that's a 350th race start.
A
Sorry, not
restart,
win.
yeah.
Yeah, he's
Oh, wow.
surpassing the original Kimi.
What? Come on, there's only one. You
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
have
There
to.
should be just one Kimi, not original Kimi. McLaren's last win, 2009. It could be their 50th 1-2 this weekend. Finally, they've of course been waiting for that 50th 1-2 for a long time. But if at all, Lando Norris, like we explained, has to have an impact on the Drivers' Championship, he has to nail that win, and McLaren has to nail a 1-2 for anything to happen.
And the start as well. Wow.
And the start, of course, how can we forget? PS3's wins, 2 wins, both have come from P2. And it's going to be Lance Stroll's 161st race, which is matching Ayrton Senna and Mika Hakkinen.
Elite company to be a part of, huh?
Yeah. Nico Hulkenberg finished 11th for the 7th time in 17th races in Baku. Can he go one better? Incredible, right?
Yeah.
And I want to see Max Verstappen and even Checo Perez's margins to the winner, because in Monza, 37 seconds off. Hungary was 21. Zandvoort was 23. In Baku, he was 20 seconds behind Checo Perez before that crash. So lots of catching up for Max Verstappen. In fact, he's never won Singapore, and I remember this stat, he's only led 3 laps, and Antonio Giovinazzi has led more laps in Singapore
Yes.
than Max Verstappen.
Mental. Yeah, I think that was 2019 or something. But let's see. So many permutations and combinations this weekend. Wow, what am I saying? Clearly, I'm excited for the race this time out. And we've decided who our money is on. Let us know who you think is going to win the Singapore Grand Prix by reaching out to us on our social media platforms. But thank you for listening to this episode, folks. We'll be back, all 3 of us, for the race review on Monday. Stay tuned for that one. Bye-bye.